Ephesians 5:10 says, "Try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord." Now that begs the question, how? That's what we're going to discuss in this episode of Lifting the Darkness. Hi, my name is Danny Levesque, and this is Lifting the Darkness. And again, the answer to that question is going to be twofold. One, from our previous episode on understanding what the Bible means by light and darkness. There'll be a card up here in the upper right, left-hand corner of the screen. Click on that. You can view that episode. But in general, what the Bible means by light and dark, if you're in the light, that means you understand. You understand things correctly. In the darkness, you're in ignorance. You don't quite understand things correctly. But the answer to this question is also in our passage in Ephesians 5, verse 3 through 21. I will put that passage in the description below, as well as one other verse that we'll use in this concept today. So how do I discern what is pleasing to the Lord? How do I practice discernment? And I believe the link is in verse 7, going into verse 8, where Paul says, "Therefore, do not become partakers with them, for at one time you were darkness." Now, note that the "them" is in the verses before that God is describing people living in various sinful lifestyles. Now, this begins to blow my mind, because that means that if I am living in sin, if I'm doing different sins in my life, I am causing there to be darkness in my life, which means my past matters. Now, that doesn't mean we can't begin to get back into the light. But imagine like getting some momentum in a straight line, that you're moving in a line, but then something comes in and disrupts that, and you have to regain momentum. You've lost something every time there's a disruption. It's the same way with this light and darkness, that if I'm walking in the light, I'm living the lifestyle God has called me to live, then I am going to begin to understand and hear God's voice better. But whenever I turn to sin, or I give in to some temptation, or I walk in the flesh, then I'm beginning to create darkness or cause darkness to be in my life. And that's why this pursuit of hearing from God and discerning correctly, we must understand that this is a all-inclusive. There's a lot of things that need to be taking place, and it is a lifelong journey, and there's a lot of effort that needs to be in this. It's why very few people actually have good discernment skills, is because people want the quick answer. And if you want the quick answer, not only is discernment for you, but this channel is not for you. But I hope you heard me. Discernment is not for you. Because if you're just looking for if I just believe in Jesus, or if I just go to church, if I just pray more, then I'm going to be able to hear clearly. And those things are important, but it needs to be all of it. I need to do all the work if we're going to begin to hear clearly. Now, don't misunderstand me. That doesn't mean that it's not all God that's bringing the light, but there are certain things that God calls us to do, which is why Paul continues in verse 8 to verse 9, "But now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light, for the fruit of light is found in all that is good and right and true." So I have to be living a certain kind of life, and then the more I'm living that life, the more I'm able to discern what is pleasing to the Lord and good and right and true. Now, we'll get to down the road a more detailed description of what is good and right and true. But for now, let us consider that Isaiah 5:20 gives us the warning that there are some who call evil good, which means that in me, I have the capacity to think that something is good, right, and true, and be totally wrong. So there's always, just like in the last episode, that need to keep in the background that I could be missing it still, even though I really think this is good and right and true. And that leads us back to our introduction verse of verse 10, "Try to discern." Now note there are two things here. One is there is the command to do something, to make an effort to discern well. This goes against those who maybe are more agnostic, where an agnostic approach is, can you ever really know what is true and what is the right decision? So why really go into this much work? That's not biblical. As you see here, Paul is telling us we need to put forth the effort. We need to be doing the things in order to assure that we are walking in the light. So he tells us to do that, to put forth the effort. But again, he includes the word try. So we also have to keep that in the back of our mind, that this is always an effort that is most likely going to not always be perfect. We're going to make mistakes, and I could be wrong. I could do all the research, I could do all the study, I could do all the praying, I could do all the right practices, and still possibly be wrong. So that word try needs to always linger in the back of my mind when I'm trying to discern and hear God's voice. I'm trying to do it. So I can't be confident that I'm absolutely right, and that has to always stay back there. But back to the efforts, verse 11, Paul says, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. Now, this implies that I have some kind of interaction with darkness. If I'm exposing it, I am aware of it, I know of it, I might even understand it, and so there's some kind of interaction with this. So participating in the works of darkness doesn't mean you're not researching, studying, having the conversations, that you're not in the know. It just means that you're not actually doing the dark deeds as the first part of this chapter shows us, or you're not actually believing and trusting in the dark ideas. You just know them, you understand them, and then you're going to begin the process of exposing them. But the question is, who am I exposing this to? Paul is not intending here for me to go and make sure everybody knows that guy is teaching the wrong thing, or this concept is wrong, or if I'm a preacher, then I'm going to preach a sermon to people to tell people, or I might start a YouTube channel to tell people that guy's wrong, this teaching's wrong. That's not what Paul is telling us. Paul is telling us to try to discern. This is an individual effort to know what is good and right and true. So the exposure, what I'm doing is, as I encounter things, as I'm interacting with things, I'm bringing light exposure to it so that I personally can see if this is good and right and true, if this is pleasing to the Lord. So this is what I need to be doing. But how or what is happening when this exposure takes place? Well, Paul continues in verse 13 and 14, but when anything is exposed by the light, it becomes visible, for anything that becomes visible is light. Therefore it says, awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Christ will shine on you. So first key element here is your relationship with Jesus Christ. It is Jesus that's helping me see. Jesus is that light. But again, anything that becomes visible is light. That means that the more I'm exposing things, the more I'm examining things, the more I'm pulling in all the details, the more I'm able to see because I'm in the light. So I need to do this constant work of questioning and looking. And this is where in verse 15 through 21, Paul gives us 6 tools that we need, or 6 practices that we need to be doing on a regular basis. And again, back to the work part of this. If you want to hear God's voice, if you want to be able to discern what is good and right and true, what is pleasing to the Lord, you can't just take a simple approach. This is a lifestyle, and this involves practices and discipline and constant work. If you really want to hear, if you really want to know, then you can't take the shortcut way out. So the 6 practices are, and we'll just mention them in brief here, and then in the future we'll get into more detailed explanation of these elements. First is verse 15, to carefully examine your life, to regularly ask yourself, my actions, my thoughts, my beliefs, are they right? Are they biblical? Second is verse 16, use your time well. So make sure that though it's not wrong to pursue pleasure and to entertain yourself and such and to rest, we need to make sure that a good amount of our time is spent on these practices so it can't just be, well, yeah, I said a prayer somewhere, or I went to church, or I read a chapter of the Bible. It needs to be a constant presence in our lives. The third, verse 17, understand God's will. So it's not just examining like the agnostic. It's not just questioning everything. It's questioning everything, asking, is this godly? Testing to see, is this pleasing to the Lord? The fourth one, verse 18, be filled with the Spirit. Now, setting aside our differences of whether you believe the baptism in the Holy Spirit is the same as salvation or a separate experience, or whether you believe it's a one-time experience or it's multiple experiences, nonetheless, what we need in our lives is the working of the Holy Spirit. And sometimes God waits for you to open the door for Him to begin to do that work in your life. So we need to constantly and regularly be opening the door to allow the Holy Spirit to do a work in our lives. Fifthly, verse 19 and 20, worship with others. It is so frustrating how many people think I'm going to get in the light all alone. No, we need to be with other believers. So go to church with them. Worship with them, build relationships with them, let them speak into your life, and invite believers into your life, and you're going to be more in the light. If you're not doing this, this is a big reason why you might not, or you might be struggling to hear God's voice. Then sixth and last, verse 21, submit to other believers. I need to have people holding me accountable, saying, is that belief true? Is that biblical? The way you're living, is that right? Is that biblical? And so I need people to be exposing things in me. And the more I'm practicing all six of these, and I hope you're seeing this is not a simple fix. This is why it's hard to discern, why it's hard to hear God's voice for certain, is because there is so much darkness that needs to be peeled off, and it takes the work that God tells us to do in this passage. So this is just an introduction to getting into exploring those details. We're going to continue to do that. And so I hope you will join me in lifting the darkness, that we continue to explore what does the Bible reveal to me on what I should be doing and thinking so that I can walk in the light and hear God more clearly. Again, I hope you'll join me. The first of each month is when I will upload a new video. And I'm asking you, please help me to not only help you, but to also help other people. So please share this video with others. Please make sure you interact with it. So if you give us a like and subscribe and hit the notification button and leave a comment on the video, if you do all those things, it makes this video more visible. But especially tell somebody else about it. I would greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions or any insights or any experiences that you're having regarding lifting the darkness or discernment, please leave that in the comments below. I would be glad to answer those questions or respond to what you have to say, or just to hear from you. If you would like to be notified when new things are happening in this ministry, the email is in the description below. Just email me, and I'd be glad to make sure that you're receiving those updates. So now let's go and walk as children of the light, lifting the darkness and being pleasing to the Lord. Thank you for joining me.